Every year, Christmas brings with it a sense of magic. Twinkling lights, carols echoing through the streets, families gathering around dinner tables. But for some, the season can feel less like joy and more like a mirror reflecting everything they're missing. Ethan Carter had everything most people dream of. A towering office overlooking the skyline, a sleek car that turned heads, a watch that cost more than most people's rent. On paper, he was the definition of success. But behind the power suits and polished smiles, Ethan was lonely. This Christmas Eve was colder than most, not just in weather, but in spirit. Ethan found himself wandering the city aimlessly after his last board meeting of the year. No one was waiting for him at home, no holiday plans, no family dinner, just silence. Eventually, he ended up in a quiet park downtown, one of the few places untouched by the commercial buzz. Snow dusted the benches, kids ran past throwing snowballs. Couples walked hand in hand, wrapped in scarves and laughter. And there was Ethan, sitting alone on a bench, barely noticing the joy around him. He wasn't bitter, just numb. Until a voice broke the stillness. Ethan Carter wasn't used to being approached by strangers, especially not on a night like this. He had spent the past hour walking aimlessly through the city, trying to convince himself that solitude was a choice, not a condition. But as the snow began to fall heavier and the holiday lights blurred into a swirl of color, his thoughts grew heavier too. That's when it happened. A pair of tiny boots crunched up to him on the sidewalk. "Hi," the girl said, voice small but firm, as if she'd rehearsed this greeting. She couldn't have been more than 7, bundled up in a puffy coat and wearing a reindeer hat that flopped over one eye. "You look like you need dinner," she added, tilting her head. Before Ethan could reply, her mother approached, graceful and composed, with a calmness in her expression that made the noise of the city seem distant. Her name, he would later learn, was Grace. Ethan blinked, unsure how to respond. This wasn't just unexpected, it was disarming. In his world, people wanted things from him. Favors, deals, opportunities. But this wasn't a pitch. It wasn't charity either. It was sincere. The invitation came without strings, without explanation. Just a quiet offer to share something simple and real. He hesitated. Not because he didn't want to accept, but because he didn't know how. This was a man who had forgotten how to say yes to anything that didn't involve contracts or numbers. Still, something about Lily's confidence and the steadiness in Grace's eyes made him feel strangely safe. "All right," he finally said, almost surprised at the sound of his own voice. "Lead the way." As they walked together through the snow-dusted streets, something in Ethan began to shift. It wasn't dramatic, not yet. But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't walking away from something. He was walking toward it. Ethan stepped into Grace and Lily's apartment expecting polite small talk and maybe a quick meal before making a quiet exit. What he didn't expect was to feel like he had entered another world entirely. The warmth hit him instantly. Not just from the heater humming beneath the window, but from the scent of rosemary and roasted chicken, from the soft flicker of candles on the table, and from the laughter echoing from the kitchen, as Lily insisted on setting the table herself. The table wasn't perfectly curated like the ones in his luxury dining room. It was lived in. Mismatched chairs, a snowflake tablecloth slightly stained with cocoa, napkins folded with the kind of care only a child could manage. And yet to Ethan, it felt more real than any dinner he'd attended in the past 5 years. Grace moved through the kitchen with quiet confidence, balancing dishes and making sure Lily didn't sneak too many olives before dinner. She was the kind of host who wasn't trying to impress anyone, only to make them feel welcome. And she did. Remarkably so. They sat down to eat, and Lily immediately launched into a story about how her teacher wore 2 different socks and pretended it was on purpose. Ethan chuckled, more amused by her delivery than the story itself. Grace asked him about his childhood Christmases, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan talked about his mother's gingerbread cookies and the snow forts he used to build with his brother before life pulled them in different directions. Conversation flowed easily, with no mention of stock options or mergers. Just favorite holiday traditions, the magic of snowfall, and why Lily was certain Santa preferred oatmeal cookies over chocolate chip. Grace listened intently, not because she was being polite, but because she genuinely cared. That realization caught Ethan off guard. He dined with presidents of companies, celebrities, and world-class chefs, but none of those meals fed him the way this one did. There was something nourishing beyond the food, something human, something Ethan hadn't even realized he was starving for. Connection. By the time dessert rolled out, a slightly lopsided apple pie Lily proudly declared as mostly homemade, Ethan wasn't thinking about his emails, his clients, or his next meeting. He was thinking about how good it felt to be invited into a home, to be seen not for what he had, but for who he was. And that quiet, ordinary dinner? It cracked something open inside him, something that had been sealed shut for far too long. The change wasn't sudden. There was no grand epiphany or overnight revelation. Instead, Ethan's transformation unfolded in small, almost imperceptible ways, like snowflakes gathering slowly on a window pane until the whole world looks different. He started by rearranging his priorities. The meetings that once consumed his evenings, he began rescheduling them. The holiday gala his company hosted every December, an event he used to obsess over, suddenly felt hollow compared to Lily's school winter concert, where she sang off-key but beamed at him from the stage like he was the only one in the audience. Even his apartment, once filled with sleek furniture and cold lighting, began to change. A drawing from Lily, crayons and all, found its place on his fridge. A stack of Grace's favorite books appeared on his coffee table. The silence he once thought was peace now felt empty without their voices echoing in his mind. It was Grace who noticed at first, not in a dramatic way, but in the way he lingered longer in conversation, the way he started listening more and interrupting less. She saw it when he offered to fix a loose cabinet door in her kitchen, despite clearly having no idea what he was doing. Or when he showed up at Lily's school with her forgotten lunch, embarrassed but grinning like it was the most important deal he'd ever closed. There was no big speech, no life coach, no viral video, just one man choosing, again and again, to be present, to care, to learn how to belong. But perhaps the most telling moment came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in January. Ethan canceled a $1 million pitch meeting because Lily had a dentist appointment, and Grace needed someone to sit with her in the waiting room. He didn't even hesitate. That's when it became clear. Ethan wasn't visiting their lives anymore. He was becoming part of them. The man who once measured value in quarterly earnings was now measuring it in bedtime stories and Tuesday casseroles. And with each small choice, he was quietly rewriting his definition of happiness. Not in bold headlines, but in the quiet language of everyday love. That Christmas Eve had a rhythm to it, a kind of quiet magic that doesn't shout or sparkle, but hums gently in the background, like the glow of lights on a well-loved tree. Ethan arrived early, not because he was eager to propose, though that was true, but because this place, Grace's apartment, Lily's laughter, the smell of cinnamon and baked bread, it felt like home, the kind of home he hadn't known he was missing until he found it. Lily had made name cards for the dinner table, each one drawn with glitter pens and little hearts. Ethan's read, "Mr. Ethan," with a stick figure penguin drawn beside it. Grace rolled her eyes and laughed when she saw it, and Ethan smiled so widely it surprised even him. After dinner, they moved to the couch, sipping cocoa with marshmallows that melted too fast. Lily was humming quietly, curled up with her favorite blanket, the one Ethan had gotten her last winter. Soft, green, with cartoon penguins sliding across the edge. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and felt the small velvet box. His heart started to beat louder. But it wasn't fear. It was something warmer, anticipation. Hope. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't make a speech. He just waited until Lily looked up at the tree and whispered, "This is my favorite night ever." And then he turned to Grace. "I don't have a big speech," he said, his voice low and certain. "No grand gestures, just this truth. I love you. I love Lily. And this life we've built, one quiet Sunday at a time, is the best thing that's ever happened to me." He opened the box. A simple ring, no flashy stones, just a symbol of something solid, something real. "Will you marry me?" Grace didn't cry right away. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time all over again, like she'd always known this moment would come, but still couldn't believe it had. Then finally, with the gentlest smile, she nodded. "Yes." Lily leapt to her feet and threw her arms around both of them, knocking the cocoa off the table. I knew you were going to do it tonight." They all laughed, grateful, a little teary, cocoa-soaked and clumsy, but perfectly complete. And as the snow began to fall outside their window, Ethan realized this wasn't just a proposal. It was the closing of one chapter and the beginning of a new one. One written not in contracts or corporate goals, but in dinners, snow days, bedtime stories, and love. Quiet, steady, undeniable love. For most of his adult life, Ethan associated Christmas with transactions. Gifts sent to clients, bonus announcements, corporate galas with open bars and closed hearts. The holiday became another line item on his schedule, strategic, polished, and ultimately empty. But that first evening with Grace and Lily peeled something back he didn't know had grown so thick. The armor. The silence that had been masking itself as independence. The distraction he'd mistaken for purpose. In their home, Christmas wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. The ornaments weren't color-coordinated, but each one told a story. A tiny cardboard sleigh Lily had made in kindergarten, a star made from popsicle sticks and glitter, a photo of Grace's late parents tucked behind a string of lights. There were no catered meals or designer wreaths, just warmth and a table with room for one more. What moved Ethan most wasn't the generosity of their invitation. It was how effortless it was. Grace hadn't calculated how it would look, and Lily didn't hesitate with suspicion. Their kindness wasn't performative. It was instinct. And in that simplicity, Ethan discovered something profound. Christmas isn't about staging joy. It's about creating space for it. It's the act of making room, at the table, in our homes, in our hearts, for someone who never expected to be there. As he became part of their lives, he saw this again and again. In Lily's excitement to make hand-drawn cards for neighbors. In Grace's quiet way of setting aside a portion of dinner just in case someone stops by. In the way they celebrated small things, a good day at school, a new cookie recipe, the first snow, with genuine enthusiasm. Christmas, he realized, had never been lost to him. He had just been looking for it in the wrong places. And now? He could see it clearly, not in grand gestures, but in gentle ones. Not in what he could buy, but in what he could give of himself. If this story warmed your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more stories that celebrate the beauty of everyday moments, and check out our other videos right here on the screen. And if you believe that family can be chosen, not just inherited, leave an @ in the comments. See you in the next story.